Hi, I'm Danielle Johnson. I'm on the SPU women's rowing team.
Danielle, you just finished the head of the lake race, 3 miles of rowing. How did things go for you?
It went really well. It's my first 5K, so I didn't really know what to expect going into it, but I think for my first race it was a pretty good one.
Generally, in spring, it's Olympic-style racing, side-by-side, 2,000 meters. This is more than double that. How do you go and what approach do you take differently for a head race?
It's a lot different just because you're not lined up with the boats from the start. They're not next to you, so it's hard to see your competition right away. So going into the race, we had a plan of who we wanted to pass and win since we weren't starting next to them. So you have to gain a lot of water before you can pass anyone. So.
And what about conserving energy? In a 2,000 meter race, you can, I would assume, go a lot harder for the whole distance, whereas this much long, 3 miles maybe conserve more. What's the dynamic there?
So for the longer race, you usually have a little bit lower of a rate, which helps conserve energy, but just making sure you stay consistent throughout the whole race. It's just more spread out, so you don't have quite as much of a settle in the beginning and you sprint at the end, but just everything is just stretched out longer. And, yeah.
You were in the second Varsity 8 race. Your team, there were 4 in the race. Your team started last, ended up finishing second, so you passed a couple of crews. Describe the race for me a little bit.
So coming into the race, we had a plan to pass Washington State relatively quickly. We executed that coming around our first turn, which was good, and it set us up for success. In other turns, we were out by ourselves, which is where we wanted to be. And then coming through the Montlake Cut and around the final turn, our coxswain was keeping us informed on how much space we had between us and University of Portland, and we ended up passing them within the last 500 meters, which was pretty cool.
Great. Now those oars are long. How difficult is it to navigate to get around another crew?
It's pretty difficult, but mostly we rely on the coxswains. You just have to give them enough space, and when you're on the turns, especially in head races, coxswains will ask port or starboard to pressure up to make sure they can get around the turn, because they can't rely solely on the rudder, but they have experience, so I trust them.
Great. In the 2,000 meter races, there are some, you pick up the stroke rate, have some sprint times in there. Is that also happening in a head race, or is it a pretty steady pace the whole way through?
So in the head race, we don't pick it up as much in the start. In the 2,000 meter race, the start, we bring it up pretty high, and then we settle back down. In the 5K, we just start relatively close to the pace we want and keep it that way, and then towards the end for the sprint you can bring up the stroke rate, but going into it we were just focusing on dropping the splits, and sometimes the rate comes up that way.
Great. Well, a great race for your crew. Also the varsity crew, they finished third behind 2 very good crews from the host University of Washington, who won the national championship last year. Obviously you didn't get a chance to see them compete, but your thoughts on them having a good race as well?
Yeah, they did really well. They improved a lot from last year, and you can definitely see the growth in our team just comparing the varsity 8's times from last year and this year with relatively the same rowers, so they did pretty well.
This was your first head race. You had the advantage of being in a crew with a lot of veteran rowers, many who'd also been in a head race before. The third varsity crew had a veteran coxswain and 1 rower, and the other 7 rowers were all novices. Did you hear from them how things went, or what did you think about that?
Yeah, they definitely said it was long, which is expected when you're a new rower because it feels long for me, and I've been rowing for a year. So, yeah, they just talked about how they needed to stay consistent the whole way, and it was definitely a new experience for them.
Great. The weather was terrific today. Was that ideal conditions, you think?
Yeah, the weather was really nice. It was a bit cold, so just extra warm up, but out on the course, everything went really smoothly. So.
Great. And lastly, let's just quickly talk about yourself. Tell us where you're from.
I grew up in Southern California, but I've lived in Washington for about 5 years now, in Everett, Washington.
Great. And what is your history with rowing? When did you start rowing?
I started rowing last year when I came to SPU. I did cross country in high school, so endurance sports. I'm kind of used to, and so I feel like that set me up for success in rowing. But yeah, I just started last year.
Great. And you're back this year, so obviously there's something about it you love. What is it you like about being on the rowing team?
It's definitely different from any sport I've done before. It takes an immense amount of teamwork when you're in a boat and you have to be unified with 8 other rowers and listening to your coxswain and everything. And I just really like the team atmosphere and pushing each other to your limits.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the time. Congratulations on a great race today.
Thank you.